I want to welcome you to this week's episode of Shugyo. Today we're going to be talking about Jishu Geiko, or solo practice. I'm going to be doing a deep dive and exploring all of the different areas that we should focus on when building our own solo practice routine. I also want to share with you what my teacher has recommended to me in terms of how much of my training should be solo training versus going to the dojo and training there. What does that look like? As well as merging my martial arts training with my fitness routine, whether that's going to the gym or working out at home. What does that look like? And most important, I'm going to go into the practice of visualization, which is so often overlooked, but so critically important. And we're going to do a deep dive into visualization, how you can better your visualization practice if you have one, if you don't, where to start, how to optimize it, and make it one of the most important aspects to the progress as a martial artist or to other disciplines. This is a pretty incredible episode. There's a lot of information, and what I have done is down below, wherever you're listening to this episode, there will be a link where you can go over to our website and access a free download. There's no sales attached to this or anything. It's completely free. It's just to organize all of the information, all of the steps that I've provided, and all of the ideas that you're going to be able to glean from this episode. And I'll put it together on one quick reference sheet for you. So when you're done listening to this episode, if you find some value in it, then hit the link, go over and just download that file that I'm providing for you. It's completely free. And I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your ideas, if this was helpful for you and how you are including Jishu Geiko in your own training. Okay, let's get started with this episode, and I really want to thank you for being here with me.
Welcome to Shugyo, reflections on the path to self-mastery and forging the way. My name is Adam Mitchell. I'm your host and fellow student along this path. Must have been about 30 years ago that I heard the saying, you don't go to a dojo for training, you go to a dojo to perfect your training. I was never able to remember where I first heard that, because if I could remember, I would give that person credit, certainly, and a lot of credit, because it is a paradigm shifter for me that happened, and it's something that I continue to fall back on with new students, as well as myself. When I find myself saying, I'm going to go train, I'm going to do some training at the dojo, I really have to sort of recalibrate my own perspective of it. The average is, here in America, at least, people will go to a dojo on average twice a week, and they'll go in for an hour and they'll go to quote unquote train. I'd like to shift that perspective if this is the way that you approach it. And I'd like you to consider that only 20% of your understanding comes from in the dojo if you're very, very lucky and if you're extremely committed to Keiko or to training. The other 80% is on your own. It's kind of that 80-20 rule. Now, that's not a scientific study. It's just observation of doing this and teaching for 3 decades, that the majority of your skill set, your understanding, your comprehension, and how you have made the art part of your way, part of your path, that all happens on your own time, in your own space, through your own discipline and your own commitment to practice. Going to the dojo is the highest value of that is found in going to the dojo to perfect your training, to be able to bring your victories, your challenges, looking for criticism, possibly looking for review and critique, capturing new lessons, and being able to add to what you already have. But to actually go in and do the repetitions, maybe, yes, that's okay. However, if you've never heard this before, then I would invite you this week into considering that the dojo is a place for you to perfect your training and not to go and train. So then that brings us to the question, well, what of that 80%? What does that look like? How do we approach that so that it does have value? And that's a great question. If you've never even thought of it, if you've just sort of considered solo training or just kind of working out on your own, a thing, and maybe you have a workout routine, maybe you follow an app, or maybe you have something that you do at the gym. In this reflection, I want to go deep on this topic because as a martial artist, as a traditional Japanese martial artist, this is an extremely important part of what I do. And I'd like to just sort of share my approach to it. It may not be the right approach for you, but if I can get you at least thinking about what is the right approach for you, then our time is well served together here, isn't it? So the first thing I want to share is that I have 6 areas of self-commitment that I really want to zoom in on when it talks to building my own Jishu Geiko. Now, this is the term we use in our art. It was a term that I learned from my teacher, and it just means independent practice. There's also Hitori Geiko, which is a more commonly used word, I think, or 2 words, but a term, and that's solo training. And it's extremely important in the martial arts to be able to do this. In what I study, though, it is paramount. It's so important. So anyway, there are like these 6 areas that I want to share with you, and I'm going to try to unpack each of them, and hopefully that will give you some inspiration to think of what is your path? What does your path of Jishu Geiko look like? The first thing is I have a very stable evening and morning routine. Now, I began building a morning routine years and years ago, long before it was a popular thing. I have a specific routine in the morning that I do when I wake up early, and my routine is probably different than your routine, but the thing is that I have one. And much later on, I realized that in order to have a strong morning routine, in order to really start my day the way I want to, the way that I can control it, it means I have to have a strong evening routine. And when I realized that, I began focusing in with balance my evenings and my mornings. Now, what does this have to do with Jishu Geiko or solo practice? It has everything to do with it because it really, my morning routine sets the pace for the rest of my day. And if my day is off balance, then I'm not going to be able to harmonize throughout my day. The things that I want to accomplish are going to be out of tune. So to get the best out of this time that I commit to, I really want to see and look at and optimize, how do I start my day? How do I finish my day? And in between that is my quality of sleep. Both of those, or all 3 of those topics there, evening routine, quality of sleep, and morning routine, are beyond the scope of this conversation. However, I do want to start it with, in order to have a strong Jishu Geiko, I start with that. Next is having a consistent meditation routine. Now, if this is only 5 minutes, if this is just a zazen that you do for 5 or 10 minutes, great. If it's something more than that, great. If it has some type of faith-based context to it, wonderful. But you must have a clear mind to be able to step into training. And we're going to get into the reasons why in a bit. However, I just want to say that for my own Jishu Geiko, being able to each day let your body rest, let your mind settle, and let your spirit be at ease. To be able to go there each day means you will have agency over the regulation of your physical self, of your emotional self, and the feelings happening within you, and how your mind wanders or doesn't wander, and you have control of it. So even if you have a practice each day for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes of taking complete control of the regulation of that, then this is going to serve your solo practice huge. And we're going to get into why more in a second. The third point, so my routines, morning and evening. Second is my meditation routine. The third, really teeing up my solo practice, is making sure that I consistently journal. Now, the reason for this is because my journaling practice, I do a Japanese journaling practice called Nikon, which is it's its own unique gratitude practice. But my journaling and my note keeping for my training is extremely important. And my practice in the discipline of journaling each day carries into my solo practice tracking my own performance, writing my notes. How did I feel? How is my mind wandering? How is my visualization practice? How are my muscles feeling? I look at my watch and maybe I look at, some of my health indicators and what does that look like? What is my heart rate? How am I breathing? So on and so forth. If you have a consistent journaling practice, and it can only be a couple minutes in the morning, you are going to find that your ability to record, track, and monitor your own solo training is going to increase in quality and enjoyment. Okay, that's it. The next and the fourth one is my own personal fitness routine. Now, whether you have you're a gym nut, you go to the gym, or maybe you just like to run, or you're a cyclist, or you have your own thing, you have to have some type of fitness routine. And next, I integrate my solo training, my own Jishu Geiko, as a non-negotiable part of my own fitness routine. Now, what does that look like? I keep my gym work separate. However, when I'm doing my gym work, I'm recording it in the same notebook. I am focusing on areas that maybe if something is coming up at the dojo, well, if I can do something at the gym that's going to help support that, I'm aware of it, I'm cognizant of it, and I'm going to do that work. Now, I'm integrating my solo training into my fitness training because it's really going to speak to the the individual goals that I have. And there are a couple of sets of different goals. There's my own personal fitness goals, and then there are also my martial art goals and how I want to build myself as a human from both of those, from my health and fitness. And that's the optimizing, it's the personal hygiene, it is the emotional hygiene that I do, all of that work, and martial arts fits in there. It's fully integrated into that, okay? I also want to be able to consider what health restrictions I have, and ultimately, where do I want the martial arts training to steer me in life? Let me say that again. Where do I want this to take me? Why am I doing this? We spoke about this in the previous episode with my friend Nick Kemp when we talked about ikigai and life's purpose and having a meaningful life. And what does that mean? To me, my martial arts is my ikigai. To me, my dojo is my ibasho. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. There is a very unique purpose for my deep commitment to the study of Kobudo. Yours is different than mine. Everybody's may be a little bit different. Some are very similar, but we all have differences. I want to invite you into considering that this purpose be front and center, just like your fitness goals. Why are you working out? Is it because you want to get more definition? Is it because you want to have more of a chiseled body? You want to be appealing to the opposite sex? You want to have greater longevity. Possibly you're getting on in your years. You want to have more vitality. You want to beat the illness that almost took your life. You want to be able to recover from something, or you just want to feel good. Whatever it is, you're doing it for a reason. You should also have your martial arts have a reason, and that has to be considered in your solo training. I've had these conversations with my teacher, and what he shared with me and others in our art as a good signpost to follow when it comes to solo training and integrating that into your day-to-day and integrating that into your own personal fitness routine is about 20 minutes each day of just striking, rolling, and some type of weapon, if you have a weapon in your art. However, for me, I'll do a lot of shadow work, a lot of shadow boxing, makiwara work, but a lot of repetitions of kicking and striking, different kicks. I will do stabilization drills where I kick and I'll extend a kick. I'll hold it. I'll slowly retract it. I'll put it down, and then I'm going to check in on my body and see how that feels. Then from there, I'm going to do my rolling drills. So my ukemi, I'm going to do these exercises really slow. I'm going to do my rolling, and I'm going to stay inside of the basics. I'm not going to go hard. In fact, I'm going to go really slow. That way I'm able to get a good stretch in my back. I will do a 3-second back roll. And when I'm doing this, I'm going to focus in, and I'm going to put my mind's eye into those parts of my body that are getting extended through the roll. And I'm going to try to see, is there anywhere here that feels uncomfortable? Anything that feels painful? Anything that has tension in it? And I want to take note of that. So those 20 minutes really consist of a lot of striking. They consist of a lot of movement on the ground, and then they consist of committing to one weapon for a block of time and focusing on thorough blocks of technique. Usually, for me, that is inside of fundamentals. I'm not working in the space of kata. I will sometimes get prepared for upcoming content in the dojo. I will do that, but usually I will spend, if I'm working on rokushaku bow or the bow staff, then I will work on one area of the basics, and I will usually spend 4 weeks inside that, integrating that into my own solo training routine. I'm taking notes, I'm journaling, I'm drawing stick figures if I'm doing something wrong. I'm taking notice of my legs, my knees, my depth, the extension of my arms, my body. I suffer from severe scoliosis, so I'm very cognizant of what my spine feels like. Am I leaning too far to the right? Because that's the direction my back bends. So all of this gets put into my workout journal, and I'm constantly recording this information. Okay. Now, the sixth and final thing, just to go back and review, I have my morning and evening routines. I also have a meditation routine that really helps prepare me to have control of my thoughts and my body when I go into solo practice. I journal. That helps not only set my day and prepare my goals and keep me kind of focused, but it also helps train me to not just blow through a workout and not take notice and record the results, but it also helps me to stay very focused in my workout routine on where I'm going and what I want to get out of that routine. And then I have an integrated workout as my solo routine that consists of 20 minutes daily of usually some type of striking routine, followed by some groundwork and some rolling, and then I will move on to a weapon. And I'll stay inside that weapon and that content for a period of time. The final part is very much staying committed to a dedicated space, period, end of story. Now, this can be outdoors, it can be indoors, it doesn't really matter, but this needs to become your dojo. Now, if you've ever practiced any Zen, if you've ever done a Zen retreat, or possibly you have a very disciplined practice of Zazen, then you know the importance in Zen of having a dedicated space for that practice. No different here. No different. Instead of just going into your basement and doing a workout, set aside an area in your basement and have that area specifically for your Budo practice. Have it specifically for, and if you choose to integrate in with your meditation or your Zazen practice, great. Less is better though. Less stuff, better. I choose, I mean, I'm not going to say I have the privilege of having a dojo because it's been a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, but I have my dojo. I also have my space in my home that's set aside only for that. In fact, the tatami mat is never even stepped on unless it is for that practice. I'm going to encourage you to consider the same. Now, finally, is getting the tools for Jishu Geiko correct. I have my wooden weapons. I have my iaito, my training sword. I also have my suburito. Also, the reason I'm bringing this up is having those tools set aside in this place. I also have specific training garments. I don't just go in with whatever I'm wearing or I throw some shorts on to do my Kobudo training. I put on my uniform because it is part of my mindset. Look, it's not cosplay. That's not what this is about. It is 100% around the mindset training and very much stripping myself of my daily garments, stripping myself down to nothing, just complete nakedness, and then rebuilding myself with my Keiko gi and entering my training space to do that training that builds me up, which leads me to that goal that I just shared with you. So this is my process of Jishu Geiko. There's one important point though, and really this is very much the topic of this episode. Before I get to that point, I want to sort of digress and step back into something that I spoke about, and that's the notes. That's your notebook. The notebook to me is my gold. If my house is burning down, my notebook goes with me before the photos of my children go. And kids, if you listen to this, I'm sorry, but you know that's the truth. Don't take it personal. My notebook, that is the collection of my thoughts. It is my physicality. It is my reference to the lessons my teacher is making me responsible to carry forward. It is everything. But most important, in the context of Jishu Geiko and solo training, it allows me the privilege of mental recall. I'm able to go back into my notes and not only review them, but also to, after I practice something, I record it. And that is another process of recall. And it allows me to, if I have one technique or one kata or one exercise written down, I can go back into that exercise and I can optimize it over and over again. How many times have you gone back to your own notes because maybe you trained with your teacher and then a couple of years later, you train that same technique? And because your skill set advanced over those few years, you're able to look at the technique in a new way. My notes are living documents. They're always being updated. And in fact, I'm also updating them with, did this technique on this date in Japan with sensei, topic was this, references were that, in red font or in a different color ink. I might write the questions I asked and the answers he gave. So I'm able to reference all of that. Also, another important thing for me is to actually illustrate so much of this, whether for you that might be with stick figures or possibly including backgrounds, or maybe doing drawings or sketches of your teacher, possibly even sketching out or writing something that reflects the emotion. Again, this all supports mental recall. Or it could be you're writing the kanji, and then you go and research the meaning, the origins of those words, of the names of those techniques, and maybe you even may advance forward even to learning how to brush them. That's completely up to you. But the notebook is, it is that densho of mine is an absolute treasure. This is something that every time I walk into the dojo goes with me. Every time I leave the dojo, it leaves with me. Every time I go to the gym, I bring my notebook with me. And every time I leave, obviously, it comes with me. I wake up in the morning. It's one of the first parts of my morning routine, and it's something I reflect on in the evening. I would encourage you to consider this. Think about what that looks like in your life and in your own solo training. Next, and finally, I want to get to the biggest point of Jishu Geiko. This is something that I don't know if you do or if you don't do. If you don't, please, I'm asking you to consider this. If you do already do it, I hope some of the things that I'm going to share with you here bring value. And if you're someone who's very skilled at it, I look forward to hearing back from you. Possibly there's something here I may have missed or some learning opportunity I can take from you, because this is a topic I'm very passionate about. If you've ever worked with me in any of my programs, you know how important this is. And this is the way to train your brain: visualization. Now, I want to share something that I used to do with my children's class, and this was one of the very first lessons that a young person learns in my dojo. Jumping is a big part of building leg strength, right? I think we can all agree on that. Different ways of jumping help with balance, help with coordination. Also, it's fun. Who doesn't like to jump? With the children, though, I would have them jump the length that we begin at, the length of their body. So if they lay down on the ground, from their heel to the top of their foot, we measure it. And then from there, without taking a step into it, they have to bend their knees, load their hips, lean forward onto the balls of their feet, and launch their body like a rocket forward. And they have to land with 2 feet, bending their knees, not losing balance, as though they're jumping from one tree stump onto another and not falling off. So they have to land with balance, and that's the goal. They begin with a starting point, but the goal is to work up to where they can jump the entire length of their body. Then we go a little bit further, and most of the time, this is 1 full tatami length. Most of the time, when the young person is about 11, maybe 10 or 11, depending on how fit they are, I try to get them to start with their toes at the edge of one tatami and leap so that their heels clear the other edge. And this is really important, and I'll tell you why. Most of them can't do it when they begin. Most, I will say 9 out of 10 can't do it. However, if they're really physically unable to do it, then I acknowledge that and I change the threshold. For most of them, though, we begin with a visualization practice. And even try this on your own. I have them close their eyes and I have them feel the ground with the soles of their feet. Then I have them imagine what their toes look like bumped up against the seams of the two tatami against each other where they're standing. How cool do the mats feel under their feet? Then I have them visualize with their eyes closed, lifting their eyes up and looking at the seam of the mat across from them, looking at that large area that they have to leap. Then I have them visualize slowly bending their knees and then launching forward. And as they're in the air, they can see the tatami passing underneath their feet. And then suddenly that line passes under their feet. They land, they exhale, they bend their knees into a full squat in which they hold for just a moment, and then they stand back up, proud of what they have accomplished. This type of visualization is a guided imagery that I'm taking them through. But I don't want to guide them through that and then jump. I then have them repeat that in silence. I have them do it in their own head. I have them give themselves permission, feeling how their legs feel, feeling how the mat feels under the soles of their feet, witnessing the mat pass under them, and then landing with the heels passing the far seam of the tatami. I'm here to tell you that 100% of the children who I've tested this with over 25 years and somewhere around 3,000 children were successful at doing this. Now, I do want to say that there are, of course, some children who just physically didn't have the ability to do that. I changed their threshold, and I'm going to tell you, they did it as well to their own threshold. But the gold standard in the dojo was really that one tatami length. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't even get their toes to the edge, most of them. They couldn't even get halfway through. But by the time they learned this visualization practice, they were able to successfully do it. Now, there are two really great examples when we talk about the importance and the power of visualization I want to share with you. And then we're going to get into how you incorporate this into your own Jishu Geiko, into your own solo practice. The first example is one that is quite popular. If you haven't heard the story, I want to share it with you. If you have heard it, you're going to hear it again. In 1996, there was an Israeli politician and a human rights activist, and his name was Natan Sharansky. If I pronounce that wrong, I'm sorry, but Sharansky, I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. But anyway, he beat the world champion in chess, Garry Kasparov. And really, what's amazing about this is that Kasparov was at the time defeating everyone in the world, and Sharansky had been in prison. Now, Sharansky was in prison for 9 years in Russia. And it was learned later that he was wrongfully imprisoned, and he was in a 4-foot by 3-foot cell. He had zero access to a chess set. But in order to pass time in prison, he played move over move, game from game, game after game, against Garry Kasparov. And every single game he played, he defeated him. Every single game. At this entire time, he had no access to a chess set. Every day, he defeated the world's greatest. He visualized it. When he had been let out of prison and he was living in Israel, the world champion chess player visited Israel, and Sharansky asked to have a match with the world champion. And if you haven't figured it out by now, he beat the world champion because he had visualized it in his mind and he had played it out over and over and over again. Incredible story. And by the way, if you haven't done so already, please read Sharansky's book, Fear No Evil. Incredible. The second example is in a study, a scientific study that was published where researchers found that practicing any task by visualizing it is extremely beneficial to the outcome of that task. But even further than that, the benefits of visualizing, they aren't just mental, but they can actually transform into the physical. And this is really an interesting study. The participants in the study, there were two groups. The first group visualized lifting weights and doing the physical exercises in a gym, while the second group did no exercises. However, they visualized the same repetitions with the same weights in the same environment. Now, of course, the first group gained an increase in muscle mass, but the second group gained 1/2 of the muscle mass as the first group, simply through the visualization process. I'm going to go ahead and provide the links to both of these examples if you want to have some further reference to these or learn more about them. However, I really want to spotlight the importance of visualization in your training. And now let's talk about how that is done in Jishu Geiko and why it's so important and how it can transform your own solo training. In Kobudo, we have kasoteki, which is the sort of the, I don't want to say like the pretend enemy or like that potential enemy or like a hypothetical opponent, but kaso is like imaginary, and the teki, of course, is, if you don't know it already, it's sort of the opponent, right? And without the opponent, it can be said very easily, without the visualization of an opponent being there when you're doing a technique, you're pretty much just swinging your body around in the air. And maybe you're getting some exercise, of course, but you're really not doing anything more than throwing the arms around in the air. You could be doing some muscle memory training. However, a whole nother topic for a different episode and my feelings about muscle memory. But you're not fully engaging the mind. You're only really engaging the body because you are kind of maybe having to recall the technique. Maybe the kato is like this, or you're just swinging the sword around, you're going through your movements. However, without that opponent in place and without a number of different variables that we're going to talk about, you're leaving a lot of money on the table here for the time that you're investing in this training. However, I do want to say that when we talk about solo training and visualizing that kasoteki, or visualizing that imaginary opponent, one thing that is important, this type of, a lot of the techniques, it can't come from solo training alone. I hear this all the time. I've been teaching students online since 2007, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, you can't study this stuff without a good teacher. Yes, that goes without saying. You have to have a teacher. You cannot learn a martial art, no matter how good you are, no matter how gifted you are, off of YouTube. You have to have critique. You have to have a qualified, understanding, and strict teacher who treats you with compassion, holds you accountable, and wants to elevate you, but doesn't put up with your bullshit. That is very important. You also must have, in order to develop feeling in a technique, you must have a real training partner from time to time. If you're someone who's restricted, you need to travel. You need to find a training partner and be able to work with that partner as much as you can. And if that means once a month, if it means once every 3 months, if it even means once a year, it still has to happen. And once, once this is initiated and once you've done this, what it's going to do is it's going to really expand the ability for proper and powerful visualization through those new pressures and through exposure of the actual physical training. I'm going to give you an example of, like, in our martial art, we have an uke nagashi, which is a movement that is fundamentally where one parries an oncoming attack, meanwhile initiating a counter attack. You really kind of need to experience that with a live opponent in order to be able to do it in visualization. But once you do have the feeling, once you understand it, and you've had someone coming at you with a strike or a cut, and you're able to train that uke nagashi with under the watchful eye of a teacher and with a training partner who has good, solid commitment of executing an attack, well, then you're like, okay, I get how this is supposed to feel. Now you can apply that feeling into your visualization, and you can begin to, with your kasoteki, begin to have variation in what it is that you're visualizing your opponent doing. Now, what are the steps that I've been able to really sort of distill down? What are the three most important steps when it comes to building visualization in your solo training? Whether you're doing, whether you're doing forms, or whether you're doing solo, like weapons, or whether you're doing jujitsu, or whatever it is. What are the ways to visualize? And I've ripped it down to 3 M's of visualization: mindset, mechanics, and matching. And here's what I mean. First of all, mindset. Mindset visualization is when you are pushing past your own limits. The example of that was the children jumping the tatami length. That is pushing their mindset, giving themselves permission to go beyond their own threshold, to go beyond their own beliefs. This is accomplished through exposure. It's accomplished through leadership. It's accomplished also through repetition and being able to write down and record where you were failing, what you think you need to do different. That way you can add that reflection into your own visualization. So pushing yourself past your own limitations and being able to have the mindset for this is the first visualization. The second is mechanics, and this is proficiency in form. Solo repetition with a focus on form and accuracy within your own body. So, for example, if I'm doing a kata and I'm having problems distributing the weight of my body, and I know each time I'm doing this wrong, and for some reason I keep lurching my spine forward or my knees buckling inward, like I see it, I can feel it. Okay, that means I need to stop. I need to visualize myself doing it correctly. I need to even step out of my body and look at myself, possibly maybe even as if I'm looking at myself in the mirror doing it correctly. I need to visualize looking down at my knee and seeing it track over the foot. I need to have my mind programmed to what it should look like, what it should feel like, and then execute. So we have mindset, we have the mechanical, the biomechanics of visualization, and then we have the actual visual match. And this is where we apply pressure against an opponent, and an opponent is applying pressure against us. And this is where the study of timing, space, and distance come into visualization. Now, you want to be able to randomize these techniques with kasoteki. However, you also want to be able to visualize with simplicity one opponent many times over and over, and then change it. Don't just change it every single time. So you're not going to 5'3" Karen, who's 120 pounds, to all of a sudden Markov, who's 6'7" and 300 pounds. You're not going from a white belt to a black belt. You're not going from a champion to someone who's a beginner every single time. You want to train inside that one set of variables, and you want to make them very simple. So let me go back and say these 3 M's of visualization again. You want to do visualization training for mindset, to move yourself forward, your own personal thresholds, the own narratives that are holding you back, whatever they may be. Give yourself permission to move forward. Then the next is your body, the biomechanics of your body, checking yourself, programming your mind to execute them correctly, and then match, being able to visualize against various opponents, various body types and skill levels. Extremely important. Now, what does this look like when you're actually doing these 3 M's, when you're actually visualizing in your solo training? Possibly you are working with kasoteki, you are working with that imaginary opponent in front of you. Well, the first thing is don't slack on your kamae. Don't slack on your posture because nobody's looking, because you're doing this in your dojo in your basement, or in your dojo in your garage, or your dojo in the woods. Don't slack. Hold your kamae 3 seconds. Muster up the intention within that kamae. Don't just strike a pose. Don't just stand in some awkward stance because, hey, whatever, this is what how the katsu is written, so I'm just going to start off from this position. That's cheating yourself. Second, kasoteki, keep it minimal. Keep it simple. Use one unique feature at a time and drill that one unique feature. If it's that student, that kasoteki has long legs and a much deeper range than you, train it, review it, look at it from different angles. This is important. And then third, commit all the ways through. Don't ever drop the guard, even when you screw up, even when you make a mistake. What do I mean by this? How many times have you seen someone halfway through a technique make a mistake and their arms just go limp? Maybe they smirk, they turn around, they walk away. No. Even if you make a mistake, all the ways through to zanshin at the end, even where you make those errors, this is the discipline of the training. Just half-assing it, half-baking it in your own Jishu Geiko, you're only cheating yourself. There's nobody watching you. And even if there was, nobody cares. In order for you to progress, you must have confidence in your body's language. You must have the correct intention of the form or the exercise that you're doing. You must use proper visualization, wherever that's, if it's mindset, if it's your biomechanics, if it's the person that you're about to compete with, or the person that's attacking you. Keep it minimal, but do it. And don't bail out at the end. Okay, so this brings me to the end. I want to just quickly go through this again. I want to sort of just summarize everything. In order to really have a strong solo practice routine as a martial artist, you want to make sure that you have your own routines, your daily routines in place, and that at all costs, non-negotiable, you have the time set based on your own unique goals as a martial artist, based on the goals that you have with your physical self and how you're integrating this training into your fitness and your day-to-day. You commit to it. You don't find excuses, because one excuse, as you know as well as I do, will quickly lead to the second. Well, I didn't show up yesterday, so I'm not going to show up today. You know that happens. So therefore, as a martial artist, acknowledge that one of the most important things is simply showing up. You need to show up for yourself. That's going to happen. The probability of that happening is much higher if you have a morning routine, which is built upon an evening routine. Then you're going to be able to control your mind when your mind is saying, nah, dude, I don't want to do this right now. Well, having a meditation practice in place means you will be able to regulate those decisions, not having emotional nonsense regulate those decisions, but you will have self-control. Next is being able to record this stuff in a journal. And you know what? If you miss, write it down. If you miss, take some accountability for that. If you miss your own solo training, take accountability, put it in your journal. Also, have your own journaling practice, whether that's your goals, whether that's even if it's like your dreams, man, just get in the practice of doing it. And then from there, figure out what works for you and commit to that in a dedicated space. Have the tools present for correct training so that it's always there. Don't put it in a bag and bring it to the dojo, because you're going to forget it in your car. And then that's going to give you a reason to not show up and train, or to change up your routine and slack off somewhere. Have a committed space with all of your tools in there, and go in with the correct mindset, correct uniform, just as you would the regular dojo. This is mindset training. And don't forget, in that notebook, mental recall, that's what it's about. This is an evergreen living document. You're drawing in it. You're using different forms of media, even if you want to tape articles in there that you cut out of a magazine, whatever you want to do, this becomes your living densho. When everything is all done, you really want to practice and make one of the most important areas of your training. Once you have all of this stuff in place, you want to make sure your kasoteki is your number one training partner, that you're visualizing and you're studying the power of visualization to help support your Jishu Geiko. Now, if you're able to put all of this in place, and if you're able to really understand and utilize strong visualization so that you can increase your own personal thresholds, you can decrease your defeating self-narratives, that you can get better body mechanics as a result of visualization, and your sparring numbers go up in the dojo because your kasoteki is one badass dude. Then you're going to find, amazingly, that in other areas of your life, things are going to change. This isn't a promise. This isn't some woo-woo crap. This is experience. You will find that you will be able to control things with your mind better. You will be able to have ownership and be able to shift your emotions. You're not going to be as easily triggered. You're going to be able to, man, I really feel crazy saying this, but you're going to be able to manifest situations that are meaningful and valuable to you. And again, beyond the scope of this conversation, but this is training for that stuff. It's training for living a more expanded and more sort of illuminated, like on that path to Satori. This is that stuff. This is important, and this is why we study Budo like we do. This is also just my opinion. And as I said, I would love to hear your feedback on this. I would love to hear what could help me. Maybe there's something that I missed in this. And don't forget, when you're doing this training, have confidence in your posture. Have confidence in who you are. Show up correctly. Keep the kasoteki minimal. And commit all the ways through, not dropping your guard, and don't ever give up.
Shugyo is brought to you by the Yasuragi Dojo, a traditional Japanese martial arts school and nonprofit 501c3 organization located in New York. I'm your host, Adam Mitchell, and I truly hope that you found some value and inspiration from this conversation. If you'd like to learn more about our dojo, yes, it's an actual physical dojo, not just some virtual one made up on the internet, find us on the web at yasuragidojo.com. The link is in the show notes. Or go ahead and access our free mobile app for iPhone and Android. There, you can access our daily training, coaching, live streams, meditations, workshops, and both online and in-person retreats. Our work depends on the generosity of our supporters, dedicated students around the world, and you by listening to this episode. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel, and you'll be updated on new episodes and reflections as they roll out. And if you know someone who will enjoy the conversation that we had today, please go ahead and share. Once again, my name is Adam. This is Shugyo. Until next time.